Hey guys, welcome back to Whispers from the Dark. There's something I wanted to talk about. I was watching something the other day, and they were visiting somewhere, investigating something, and they said something about driving through a cemetery to get there, and how creepy the cemetery was. Then they said, yes, it was kind of spooky. This was a paranormal channel. So that kind of perked my ears, and I thought, well, that's a bit odd. I mean, creepy and spooky is kind of what we do. I mean, that's what perks our interest and gets us wanting to go figure it out. That's kind of what we go for to find. Creepy and spooky. To try to figure it out. Why it's creepy and spooky. And what's so weird is a lot of people describe cemeteries as being creepy or spooky. I mean, I've heard that from just normal conversation with various people that aren't in the paranormal field or interest. I can somewhat understand why someone would think that it was creepy or spooky, because in our culture, how we've all been brought up to believe and think, and of course Hollywood, or Hollyweird, has a lot to do with that, and kind of how our culture thinks about certain things. Unfortunately, they can program the masses in how we accept or think about just about anything. I mean, we see that on the news. It's not really the news, it's a propaganda tool, but hey, I'm not going to go there right now. But you know what I'm saying. They can change the way people accept certain things or look at certain things. They can even come up with something completely out of the blue and do coverage on it and movies and shows about it, and people automatically accept it as real as opposed to something that was made up. It's crazy how that works. For example, after I guess we can go back all the way to the Waco standoff, the Ruby Ridge before that, a lot of things that happened where our police and or FBI, those kind of organizations, weren't looked at in a real positive way by the general population. They were feared and not trusted. So if you think about it, that's kind of when all these FBI shows and CSI and the Fox and Mulder came out talking about UFOs, and the show's Cops. All of these things started coming out to try to get people to be more interested, trusting, and such with the police and FBI. It actually worked. But that's the kind of thing I'm going with. I'm trying to explain how when things are a certain way accepted or looked at by the general population, a lot of times it's because of what Hollyweird has done to make us think that. make us view a certain topic in a certain way. Well, cemeteries, graveyards, and the like are no exception. Matter of fact, that topic is a big money maker for Hollywood because people fear death. They're scared of death. It's part of human nature to fear the unknown. And when we die, we don't know what's going to happen because most of us have not been there yet before and come back. If we've come close to dying, then we've got that experience, but there's not that many of us out there that has had that experience. And of course, the authorities, medical authorities, will say whatever we experienced or saw was due to hypoxia, which is not enough oxygen in the brain, so we were hallucinating and it didn't really happen. In other words, they can't explain what really happened, so they discount our experiences. So people fear death, so they fear cemeteries. Now, what's so strange is, back when my grandparents were alive and young and had families, it was a common thing for them on Sundays after church to go to the cemetery and have a picnic. I mean, the whole community would go. They'd go put flowers on the graves, and there was sometimes some cemeteries had little parks in them, and they'd go and have picnics, and the kids would play, and it was going to see grandma, grandpa, or your baby brother, or your uncle or aunt, or whoever had passed. Going to see them after church on Sunday was just the normal thing to do. It was a regular action that families did. It was natural and normal. Now, when people stopped doing that and started fearing cemeteries or being spooked by them, saying that they were creepy and not going there unless they were going to a funeral, I don't know when that happened. But I do know when I was growing up as a kid, my mom was a Girl Scout leader, and one of the things she did was she took us to the cemetery. Not only our Girl Scout troop, but as a family. She would take us kids to the cemetery, and we would go with trash bags and pick up trash. If there was any trash, flowers that, had fallen apart, silk flowers that had been blown around, we'd pick those up. Before we put them in a bag, we had to call her over to look to make sure that they hadn't just fallen out of something that needed to be where they need to be replaced. But if they were away from the graves, in the driveway or in the ditch, we'd pick them up. She showed us and taught us respect for those that had passed. She, taught us a lot of lessons that way, where that's our history, that's our blood, that's our, it's somebody's parents, that's somebody's kid, that's somebody's brother. And to respect that and to treat it like you would want someone to treat your parents' grave or your own. And we were taught that at a young age. I really never, I don't know why, but for some reason I never grew up looking at a cemetery as something that was creepy or spooky. I just never did. And again, maybe I just think differently. Maybe I perceive things different than other people. But I never have been spooked or freaked out or got the creeps from the cemetery. And if you think about it, think about a cemetery, okay? There's a plot of land. There's graves. There's headstones, some of which are works of art. The older ones are incredibly beautiful. I mean, the carved granite is just, it's a work of art. If you'll go to a cemetery and go to the oldest part, look at the headstones. Someone took a lot of time to carve and engrave flowers, vases, lambs, crosses, all kinds of symbols into those stones. And they're very ornate, usually. Plus their names. And they didn't have the fancy stuff that we've got now that basically is an assembly line that slides the rock over the granite and this engraving machine sits down on it and engraves whatever. It all was done by hand. Someone had a chisel, a mallet, and they had a piece of paper beside it with the description and a drawing of what it should look like. And these artists literally, painstakingly carved with love and lots of care, carved those headstones to make them to where they were something they'd be proud of to have on their own headstone or their own grave or their parents' graves. And as a tribute to their work, 150, 200 years later, they're still standing and they're still beautiful. To me, there's not a better calling than that. I am so amazed at the artwork on those headstones in the old areas of the cemeteries. And I'm so appreciative of the people and the time they spent carving those. But that's how I look at things. I'd like to know your thoughts on that. Are you creeped out at cemeteries? Do they give you the creeps? Are they spooky to you? Now, I'm not talking about going at night. I'm not spooked at night. I'm really not. But I worked night shift for 30 plus, well, close to 40 years night shift. And I've been out by myself, out in the middle of nowhere. We're talking along the border. By myself, under the stars and moon, if I was lucky enough to have a moonlight. And I've literally been places at night by myself that was dangerous. So going to a cemetery at night, I mean, the only way you can really get hurt is if you end up freaking yourself out and trying to leave and trip over a stone or something. Then you can fall and hurt yourself or damage a stone. But you can't really get hurt at night in a cemetery if you're the only physical person there. If there's no other alive people around that are trying to chase you or hurt you, then you can't get hurt in one of those places unless you trip and, fall and hurt yourself that way. And that's possible. People do actually do that. But I'd like to know, do you feel spooked or freaked out? Or do you think cemeteries are creepy? Now we're talking during the day, broad daylight. Do you think they're creepy? And if so, why? I would just like to know. I'm just curious. I'm not going to debate. I'm not going to belittle. I don't do that. I'm curious why you think or feel they're creepy. Is it because of fear of the unknown? Knowing that there's bodies under the ground? Or is it like a post-traumatic thing, stress because of losing a loved one? That's understandable. Or is this because you've always been told they're creepy or programmed to think they're creepy because of Hollyweird? Think about it and leave a message. Tell me why, if you do, why you think they're creepy. Okay, now I want to say something along with that. There are people who are buried underground in a cemetery. And with the advanced medical stuff we've got going on, it's probably very rare, I mean extremely rare, that someone is buried and they're still alive. It used to happen a lot, and I will be doing a video on that. I mean, I've got case stories where people were buried alive. It's very, very rare now because of the medical advances we've had. Plus, if you are embalmed, as soon as the embalmer goes to puncture your vein to drain your blood, they will know right then if you are still alive. And there is a chance, it's so slight, that somehow you got past the medical screening, you were pronounced dead at the hospital, somehow your heart was barely beating and you are still alive. But when you get to the funeral home, when they go to embalm you, they literally start an IV, a large bore IV, in one of your main arteries to drain your blood. And when they go to do that, then what they see will show them if your heart is still pumping, even though it's light, because your blood would be oxygenated to a degree, and it would be different than if you were deceased. That does happen. It's very, very rare. If that's not your worry, and you're just thinking of the fact that there's spirits there because there has to be ghosts because there's so many dead people. If that's how you're thinking, if that's what's spooking you, I want to give you something to think about. Look at the cemetery as, you know, they're resting, right? They're laid to rest at the cemetery. Look at the cemetery as the deceased bedroom. They're there, that's where they rest. And if you believe in ghosts, and that's why you're spooked about cemeteries, then think about this. These spirits are not going to be resting all the time. They're not going to be asleep or resting in their graves all the time. Their spirits are going to be wanting to do what they love and enjoy doing, what they're attracted to, what they knew and loved and was used to doing when they were alive. Their spirits are going to be with their family, at their home, or at someone else's home, or at the store, or at the location where they died. It could be a hospital, it could be an intersection from a car accident or a heart attack. It could be their employer. It could be at their workplace. Think about it. Seriously. There are more spirits in stores, businesses, hospitals, and along the street than there are in cemeteries. Because a lot of the spirits, once they realize they pass physically and accept that, and they check on their family or whatever, once they've accepted it and they see the light, they go to the light. They cross over. So probably only a third, I'm guessing, maybe a fourth of them stay earthbound for a while. Those are the ones that would be going back to work again because that's all they knew and that's what they enjoyed doing, or they really hated it but they liked one of their coworkers, or perhaps they wanted to go haunt a few people before they crossed over. That's possible. That's part of my plans. I gotta admit it. Or perhaps they're going to church or going to the grocery store. Maybe they're doing the things, going to the places that they used to do, the kind of things that they knew. And maybe it'll take them a while to finally understand and accept the reason people aren't responding to them. They can walk through or around people and no one acknowledges them is because they passed. And it might take them a while to accept that. And they don't have time like we do. So it could be, days, weeks, months, years. And unfortunately, it could be as long as close to 100 years. You wouldn't think so, but if you want to understand why I say that, go click on my video I did in December about the Lawson family tragedy. They were killed 90-something years ago, and some of them still have not passed. They were killed by their own father. He literally killed the whole family. Wife, kids, baby, everybody, except the one member of the family that wasn't present. He had gone to the store. He's the only one that survived. Some of them have not crossed over into the light. I can't judge them. I can't understand what kind of torment and torture they went through physically before they passed and then mentally and spiritually after. I can't imagine going through that. So all I did in my part 2 video was talk to each family member, pray for them, mourn for them, and then mourn with them. And then try to get them to go to the light. That's what I did, my gift to them for Christmas. Unfortunately, that was also the anniversary of their murder. They were killed on Christmas Day. Now, situations like that, I can see why maybe it would take a long time for some of them. And he had a lot of family that he killed. He killed everybody except the one that wasn't present. Then he killed himself. No one knows why, only he does. And he took that to the grave with him. But I can understand a situation like that where spirits might not be settled and might be too upset to accept what happened and find forgiveness in their heart to where they can go to the light and cross over. I can somewhat understand that. But there are a lot of spirits still earthbound. They're in grocery stores. They're at the gas pumps. They're along the street, walking, or in the street physically. They think they're still driving because that's where they were killed or died. Some of them are at their homes or their friends' homes, in and out. Some choose to still be here. And some are still so confused or distraught or worried or have unfinished business that they're worried about that they haven't crossed yet. But cemeteries? I'd be willing to bet probably maybe only one spirit or one person in spirit out of 100 or more might still be earthbound. So you don't really, and they're probably not at their grave very much, is what I'm saying. So you probably really don't have to worry about spirits being, or ghosts being in graveyards. I mean, it's possible. It's just not highly probable. Kind of like winning the lottery. It's possible, just not highly probable. Well, I hope I gave you something to think about. This was a lot longer than I thought, but oh well, I haven't had a video in a few weeks. I'm working on 4 right now, so you'll be seeing some come out within a couple of days. Be safe out there. Thanks for listening. Bye.